Okay. Tonight, we welcome Steve Farrar back as part of our Armchair Traveler series, the Western National Parks. In this edition, our adventure guide, Steve Farrar, will focus on the tremendous diversity within relatively short distances, which highlights this group of Western national parks. Terrain changes from the rushing waterfalls of Kings Canyon to the giant saguaro cactuses of the Sonoran Desert, from the majestic granite domes of Yosemite to the shifting sand dunes of Death Valley, from the soaring massive sequoias to the withered ancient bristlecone pines of Great Basin. The stark differences are striking. So join us as Steve takes us on a visual tour that includes some of the most iconic images found throughout the entire national park system. And as a bonus, I believe he's going to be sharing with us some information about a few parks that have been downgraded from national park status and explain some of the reasons why, maybe. So thank you very much. And thank you, Steve, for joining us tonight.
All right, great. Well, welcome. Glad you guys tuned in again. And the set of parks that we're going to be covering tonight include some of the most iconic images in the park system. The ones that spring to mind when you think national parks. Some of them are not as popular. To save time for the biggies, I'll kind of skip through some quickly so that we can spend time with the more deserving parks, if you will. So without further ado, oh, just as a note, the extra bonus is next month on the Central Parks.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'll get to those at the end. But tonight we're gonna basically be in California, but we're gonna start out over in Nevada on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevadas in the Great Basin. Great Basin doesn't spring to the lips of too many when you think, oh, what's your favorite national park? Unless you've driven cross country, you probably haven't been there. It's basically on the way to nowhere. If you have driven from Salt Lake City to get over to the left coast, you may have crossed the great nothingness. It's a basin, literally. You have a high Columbia Plateau, high elevation to the north, and then to the south, it's bordered by the Colorado Plateau. So there's two high plateaus, north and south. East, you've got the Wasatch Range over in Utah, and the western border is the Sierra Nevadas. So you've got a bowl in the middle, and it's a very big bowl. It's 200,000 square. This isn't acres, this is square miles. 200,000 square miles. So books on paper, good if you're driving, because it covers some serious distance. It's called the Great Basin because there are no outlets. All precipitation that falls in this region, there's no outlet over to the Pacific or down to the Gulf of Mexico. It just sinks into the water table. So it's a self-preserved basin. Up in the eastern corner of Nevada, Great Basin was just recently, 1986, was upgraded. It used to be a national monument, Lehman Caves National Monument. But in the 60s, we had a climate scientist who wanted to find out just how old the Prometheus tree was. Prometheus at the time was thought to be the oldest living thing on Earth. Mm. So this climate scientist saw fit to, the way you tell that is you bore a core sample into the heart of the tree and remove it, and then you count the rings and see how old it was. Well, how many rings? It grows a ring a year. Well, he broke the bit off and drilled another hole, and long story short, he killed a 5,000-year-old bristlecone pine. So that not happen again, immediately Congress conservationists sprang into action. They demanded that the borders of the park be expanded and made a national park to protect the grove of bristlecone pines that used to have Prometheus in there. So now you have these absolutely outlandish, these bristlecones are extremely unique. They don't particularly look very lively, but they're old. They're the longest living things on Earth. And they don't grow anywhere else. If you want to see a bristlecone pine, you come here. There are reasons for that. And if you look, you don't have to fight your way through the underbrush to go see them. They grow between basically 6,000 and 11,000 feet elevation, where not a lot of other plants are. They like cold temperatures, dry soil, high winds, and short growing seasons. So basically they have the place to themselves. Nobody else grows there. So it's not hard when you walk around there. They're all over the place, and they don't look particularly lively, but it is absolutely nothing short of surreal to sit at the base of a 5,000-year-old living entity. Lehman Caves still exists. There are tours in the cave. There's actually quite a few caves. There are 40 of them within the boundaries of the big limestone layer that's been eroded over time. The only one that's allowed, public is allowed into, is Lehman Caves. There are formations, there are stalactites and stuff. It's not going to make you forget Carlsbad Caverns in a hurry, but it's a nice cave. You can go for a tour. There is a glacier. It's rather the runt of the litter of the U.S. glaciers, particularly the lower 48 glaciers. That little patch at the base of Wheeler Peak, I took this in the summer, so even in August, it never disappears, so it qualifies as a glacier because it's a patch of ice that stays year-round, but there's not an awful lot there. Wheeler Peak, on the other hand, is a cool hike. It's a 13,000-foot peak, and it's not exactly a technical climb. It's just up that open ridge there. However, the guidebook warns you that, by the way, you're climbing within 3 miles. You climb from 9,000 feet where the trailhead is up to 13,000. So within a space of 3 miles, you gain over 4,000 feet in elevation. So if you just drove in and you just got to 9,000 feet, jumping up to 13, you can get some altitude sickness. So you should hang out and camp there and be at altitude for a while before you attempt it, or else you can get altitude sickness. It's extremely open, and there are storms virtually every afternoon that blow through. So if you happen to be up on the ridge there, when the lightning hits, you would be the high point, and that's a danger. So time your hike so that you're not alone up there. And by the way, it's in the desert, so you have dry conditions that are conducive to rattlesnakes. So other than that, it's a great hike. If you be careful. You just have to know where you're going. So you hike right up along that ridge line there, and it's rather steady, up, but the view from the top is good. There's the bristlecones, the grove down below. There's a campground not far from there. They're at 10 to 11,000 feet elevation, and there's a campground right at 10,000 feet. So you can sit there. There are virtually no towns anywhere near there. So it was designated a dark sky park because there's no man-made light at all in evidence virtually anywhere around there. Combined with the altitude and the low humidity, it makes for extremely clear viewing opportunities. Stars, planets, clusters, meteor showers. It's an awesome place to be. You can see them all over the place. So they've erected this. This is the only national park that has a research grade observatory in it. which is kind of strange because it's remote controlled. So you can you can be sitting in the area and all of a sudden the eye opens up and the thing recoils. But this is why it's there, because the nighttime sky is just absolutely alive with anything heavenly. You can get some very memorable shots
Wow.
with the oldest trees on Earth combined with that. Those aren't clouds, that's the Milky Way, very much in evidence. So camping out up there is rather a unique experience. Worth staying over. So that's Great Basin. Now we're gonna hopscotch over to the western side of the Sierra Nevadas, to the middle of California. Pinnacles National Park is one of our newer ones. It was just designated a national park in 2013. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, actually. It's 27,000 acres, which is nothing to sneeze at. It's decent size, but by comparison, we talked about the Alaskan parks. Kenai Fjords is the smallest Alaskan park. It's 670,000 acres. So this one's kind of a spit in the bucket. There's not an awful lot there. And in my considered opinion, it was doing just fine as a national monument. But what's unfortunately driving the upgrades these days are greedy municipalities and governments, because a national park is the gold standard. And if you get that moniker, it brings visitors, it brings their tourist dollars. So it was upgraded. And California has a complex. They were tied with Alaska. Alaska and California each had 8 national parks. And so California one up them by upgrading Pinnacles National Monument to a national park. You can approach from either side, either the east or the west, but there is no, you can't go across the park. There's no through roads. This is this is why I say it's not exactly like they had to ward off the condo developers weren't beating down the gates here. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's all lava fields, big jumble of rock formations. It's fun. They have some make it accessible to get up into the volcanic rocks, into the peaks. These are the pinnacles that it's named after. And you can practice your rappelling and rock climbing skills there. There is enough to do. If you happen to be, what the devil's, an insectologist. If you're into insects, this is this is a must see. I didn't even know there were 500 different species of moths. Never mind in the world. This is within the borders of the park. There are 500 species of different moths. And as a bonus, you get 400 different species of bees. I have no idea. They're all cataloged. If you go to the visitor center, they're all on display. How you differentiate one from the other is beyond me, but somebody specializes in it, and that's what they say. So if you're into bugs, go visit Pinnacles. They're not really caves. It's more a jumble of rock falls. They call it Bear Gulch Cave. You can go down into it, but it's more these jumble of rocks that are overhanging that you can access. You got to watch your head. They're low bridges and stuff. They do have access gates that can be closed during when the bats are breeding. They can keep people out, and the bats can still access it in and out. So there's a gate that closes off. There's our bats, the long-eared bats that nest in there. This is why you want to go there, though. The condors, the California condors are, if you ever see one in the wild, it's a sight that you'll not soon forget. They were absolutely extinct. There were no more. They were off the list in 1987. That they had a few in zoos, but other than that, in the wild, they no more existed. They've had a calculated release program back into the wild in 3 Zion, Grand Canyon, and Pinnacles national parks, which has been extremely successful. There's now almost 500 of them. as of this year. 500 isn't exactly a stampede, but that's from zero. So they're coming back. It is pretty bizarre, however, because they've all been released and they're all numbered. So you see these things. I mean, if you see a big turkey or something, it's imposing. These are much bigger and they're all numbered. So you can see them sitting there and it's like they're somebody's pet. They have a 10-foot wingspan. My van isn't even 10 feet long. I mean, they're the largest North American land bird anywhere.
Wow.
So if you want to see them, that's where you go. So that's Pinnacles. And now we get into the Sierra Nevadas. That would be my three sons. Or as my wife says, our three sons. Yosemite easily is worthy of the rest of our hour together here. It's up in the northern end of the Sierra Nevadas. You can see the middle there, the little prong that outlines the Yosemite Valley. It's very justifiable that all visitors flock to the valley. It's worth, if you're out there, you have to go to the valley. It's amazing. But what you have to understand is that the Yosemite Valley only represents 3% of Yosemite National Park. There's an awful lot more to see. 4 million a year, and I'll guarantee you, if you go in January and February, you'll have some elbow room. It's not crowded, so that means in the summertime you're going to have company. You drive in from the western entrance, and you're looking east down. So you're standing at this view at the western entrance to the valley. Left is to the north, right is to the south, and Half Dome is at the eastern end down the bottom. When you drive through the Wawona Tunnel and you have Inspiration Point here, it's a scene that is just nothing short of jaw-dropping, because Bridal Veil Fall over on the right is there. Just stunning. That's a 4,000-foot sheer granite face, El Capitan. It's something that you'll not soon forget. And as a bonus, you have the Mariposa Grove of sequoias. So if you come up from the south, you enter through Mariposa. Galen Clark was the first ranger in the park. He didn't really discover the grove. The Indians brought him. The indigenous folks that were living in the valley brought him in and wowed him. He was determined enough that he went to Washington and got, in 1964, President Lincoln had other things on his mind than setting up a conservation patch, but he actually did that. He passed the first bill ever to preserve land for public use. They didn't call it a national park, so that moniker is reserved for Yellowstone, but this was the first tract of land that was set aside for public use. Galen Clark served as the guardian there for 24 years, and then he handed it off to Frederick Law Olmsted.
Oh.
Frederick Olmsted had his headquarters down in Brookline, Mass., which is a National Historic Site, well worthy of time if you get the chance to go visit his place. We'll cover that in another presentation, but he chaired the commission, which wanted to see to it. He got absolutely charmed, and his greatest fear was that the valley would turn into another Niagara Falls and be commercialized. Father of landscape architecture. He's got quite a few notches on his belt there. He designed I don't know if you've ever been to North Carolina, the Biltmore Estate. That was his doing, to design he designed Boston's Emerald Necklace, all the parks around Boston, Central Park in New York, the U.S. Capitol building grounds. He was pretty productive. So he ended up leaving there, but initially Yosemite Valley was under his charge, and then he handed it off to John Muir. he arrived in 68, just in time to take up residence, and he he was very successful. He founded the Sierra Club. He bent the ear. That's Teddy Roosevelt with him at the base of one of the Mariposa Sequoias. He got Teddy to come out there, and they actually managed to ditch all of the whatever passed for Secret Service at the time, left them down in the valley. Teddy was supposed to be the guest of honor at a dinner party down there, but Muir got him away, and the two of them went up. This is a shot up at Glacier Point, where you've got Yosemite Falls in the background there. And the two of them camped up there together and just sat out under the stars with a campfire. And you can go there today. That's Glacier Point. That's the rock that they were standing on with Yosemite in the background, looking 3,000 feet down at the valley. So that was the view that enamored Teddy into, okay, I get it. This is special. So that's we actually went about 1,600 vertical feet above Glacier Point. There's a dome, a bald granite dome called Sentinel Dome. So the boys saw that and said, "Well, hey, look, we can go up higher." That waterfall behind them, upper, middle, and lower Yosemite Falls, is the tallest waterfall in the lower 48. Well, in North America, actually. It's 2,400 feet. So they got to sit there. Mom was having a panic attack when I said, "Oh, just back up a little bit more and we'll get a good picture here." Obviously, it's accessible with kids. It's a trail that you can climb readily, but unforgettable views from up there. El Cap, the western guardian of the valley. That's the 3,000-foot sheer face of the nose. And there are some people that can climb it. I'm not amongst them. Actually, when I was visiting there, you see the bottom of the El Cap has this scree from rocks that have sloughed off and gathered at the bottom. Well, one of the climbing groups had left a fixed rope in position. Even with a fixed rope, I couldn't get 20 yards up the face of it. I mean, they're hanging on to things that the normal person would not consider a handhold. These little nubbins. Number one, it's spectacularly stable and solid rock. It's sheer granite. So if you have exercised the last digits of your fingers so that they're strong enough to support your body weight, you can hang from these little nubbins and use it to climb up. It's a very special breed that does that kind of stuff. And the king of all of the special breeds is one superhuman called Alex Honnold. This is Alex actually on Thank God Ledge, which is halfway up Half Dome's sheer face. That's a 4,800-foot top to bottom sheer drop. Alex is a supremely confident individual, in addition to being part Spider-Man. He walked up, and without telling anybody what he was intending to do, he free climbed, free soloed, it's called. And that, by the way, if you want your jaw to drop, rent the movie or grab it from the library. There's a DVD documentary called Free Solo, where Alex climbs. This is the face of Half Dome that he walked to the bottom and looked up and said, "Yeah, I think I can do that," and just free climbed. Free soloing means there's no safety net. He doesn't have a climbing partner. He doesn't have any rope on him. He just chalks up his fingers and up he goes. And he scaled that face to get up to the top. And nobody else has even tried it, let alone succeeded. One hike that you can do here is the Vernal Nevada Falls hike from the valley. This is how the Merced River gets down into the valley. It comes from the melting glaciers up above. It drops over the top one, which is Nevada Falls, comes down, drops over Vernal, and then continues down into the valley as forming the Merced River. So this is the Mist Trail going up to the top of Vernal Falls, which is 300 feet tall. Not as much volume of water as Niagara, but Niagara Falls is 167 feet just by comparison. So it's basically double the height of, and that's my kids and my wife. You get in August or September or July or August, it's a great place to hike because you're constantly bathed. That's why they call it the Mist Trail. You're bathed by the splashed water like this. That's hitting the rocks at the base of it. That's a 300-foot drop where the water jumps clear of the face and just drops and smashes on the rocks down at the bottom. There's a series of three of them actually. Nevada's the top, Vernal's the bottom, and the waterfall in the middle is called the Silver Apron, where the water gushing down flows, as you can see, over a smooth section of granite where it gets to the top and drops over Vernal Falls. It's very, very cold. It's melting snow. It's not really smooth. You can catch a foot or an ankle in there, so you can get trapped. And the current is very, very strong. So owing to that, it's now off limits. That being said, back in the 80s, when I was up there, many a memorable weekend spent sliding down that on our butts, dropping into the pool, and you have to, the current whips around the corner and then goes over Vernal Falls. And so many people have died because they couldn't get out. There's the pool, the green pool, emerald pool there. And if you don't get out in time, that's the fall that you go over. So they don't let anybody swim there anymore. So I got to experience it during the golden age and never went over the edge. There's the base. That's where the water hits. Now, if you continue along up the side, you get to Nevada Falls, which is twice as tall as Vernal. This is almost 600 feet tall. There it is on the right with Liberty Cap, domes all over the place in the Sierra Nevadas, these big granite upthrusts. So there's Nevada Falls. Top of Nevada, 3.4. If you come down the John Muir Trail from down there, you can continue past. If you go up Vernal and Nevada, you can go behind Liberty Dome to the backside of Half Dome. And that's how mere humans get to the top of Half Dome, is not scaling the sheer face. You come up the slightly arching backside, but there's a set of cables there. Not particularly well maintained. There are some missing rungs and it's one person wide. So if somebody's coming down and you're going up, somebody's got to swing a leg over and stand outside while the other one passes. So it's not for the faint of heart, but it gets you up to the top. When you come up over the ridge, you get to the top of Half Dome, and that's where you're sitting. Talk about on top of the world. It's a cool place to sit. So now you're looking west from the eastern end of the valley, back at right in the center is El Capitan. And what goes up, it's much easier actually to back down the cables. So it's a fun experience. The Ahwahnee. The Ahwahnee changed hands a few years ago and is now, they wanted, when it was sold out, they wanted the new owners to pony up hundreds of thousands of dollars for the use of the name, the Ahwahnee, which it's always been known as. That was the name of the indigenous tribe that lived there. They said, no thanks, we'll rename it. So it's now known as the Majestic Yosemite Hotel, and no one ever uses those words. It's the Ahwahnee. You go in there, it's one of the grandest lodges that you could possibly stay in any of the parks. There's your dining room. There's the three boys inside the fireplace in the lobby. We were there in the summer, so there was no, but just to show you the size, I mean, it takes 6-foot logs for firewood. The Merced can be very docile if you're not there during the spring runoff. Curry Village, there are tent cabins that you can rent. You don't have to rough it in little pup tents or so. They're pretty cool. They've got sheeted beds and cots and stuff. And you are in bear country, so you have to sit through a bear orientation program where they'll tell you what bear etiquette is, where it's mandatory. You can see the metal footlocker there that you put all food and basically anything that smells perfumey that's going to attract the bears goes inside the metal storage compartments. We came out in the morning. This truck was parked 2 spaces from our van. He did everything right. He took all the food out of the cooler and it was in the food locker, but then he put the empty cooler back in the car. Well, the bears aren't stupid. They see a cooler and they know what normally is inside a cooler. So the bears broke right through the window of this truck to get at the cooler that they didn't know was empty. The guy was there, and talk about irony. The license plate, I don't know if you can see it, it's number 4UBEAR was the guy's license plate. The bear went right through the back window of it. I mentioned that you should make some time if you go to Yosemite to get up into the high country. You go from 6,000 feet down in the valley elevation up to almost 10,000 feet at Tioga Pass. It's absolutely stunning. We sat out on that point on the left there and had a picnic lunch in the middle of the summer, peak visitation, when USA Today was running stories about, the overcrowding in our parks and stuff. Never saw another person. Had this view to ourselves, Tenaya Lake. So if you just get off the main track and go up on some of the trails, you can get rid of the crowds. There's Tuolumne Meadows, which is up there. These domes are everywhere. This is Pothole Dome. Kids wanted to get up onto they're very climbable and very alluring because you can scramble right up to the top and then you get a great view of your surroundings. So it's a fun place to spend some time. There's evening in Tuolumne Meadows. There are cabins there. You can rent cabins or there are campgrounds. Campfires, the rangers will tell stories outside at night. There's an afternoon shot of the setting western sun heading east off the face of Half Dome. John Muir referred to the Sierra Nevadas as the range of light because of the unbelievable shifting of lights and how it changes the complexion of the views in the mountains. You don't even have to move. You can just sit in one place. And as the sun shifts, the transition is absolutely phenomenal. One of my biggest heroes, Galen Roll, was the first one to discover this phenomenon. Galen was a world-class photographer, and not so coincidentally was also one of America's top mountaineering rock climbers, which got him into positions where he could get images and shots that nobody else could. He was playing around up at the top of, that's El Capitan on the left, and he was up at the Summit Ridge in February when that's not lava, it's Horsehill Falls. Exactly once, one day per year, third week in February, I think, if everything's perfect, the melting snow gives enough water that the The flow of water jumps clear of the rock's face and drops. The setting sun isn't obscured by clouds. One day a year, you can get this picture. He discovered it and he printed it, and now if you go there on that one day of the year, you're going to be jostling for room, because there's people with tripods that are setting up to try to replicate this image. Very, very famous picture. So that's Yosemite. If we travel down the John Muir Trail towards the south, the next park down is Kings Canyon. They've actually conserved the wilderness in between Yosemite and Kings Canyon with two wilderness areas. One is named after Ansel Adams, the other is named after John Muir. So the entire stretch of the John Muir, it's actually the Pacific Crest Trail and the John Muir Trail run together from Yosemite down to Sequoia. It's been jointly administered. Kings Canyon physically abuts Sequoia. They've been jointly administered to for years. When I say they're designated as wilderness, that means there's not even so much as a foot trail in them. 97% of those parks, not only is there no visitor center or ranger hut or anything, there's not even a trail, let alone a road through it. It's complete wilderness. So this takes some doing to get up to the top of the lakes along the top of the Sierra Nevadas. There's one access road into Kings Canyon, which is a stunning drive. The road snakes around the canyon and gets you deeper and deeper into it. Zumwalt is the end of the road where you have to leave your vehicle, but then you can hike up different trails to gain altitude and get up top. The Pacific Crest Trail is there. 800 miles of trails to hike between the two parks. So given the population of hikers that are up there, they're few and far between. You're pretty much going to have the place to yourself. This is a stretch of the John Muir Trail, which the bears aren't stupid. If you make a nice bridge to get over the river, they're not going to swim. They're going to walk over the bridge. And they have the right of way. So if they're in your way, you butt out. This is some of the scenery from up top. Should you happen to see another dome tent on the shoreline, you just walk along and there's another couple miles down the trail, you'll have a lake to yourself where you don't have to share the view with anybody. It's pretty stunning. And where you have mountains and rainy conditions, you're going to have flowing water. So there are waterfalls. It's nothing like the Yosemite Falls, but they're gorgeous. Mist Falls is pretty prominent. There's a good grueling trail to hike up to this, which your payoff for doing that in the summer is to sit in the falls. But this is why you make the effort to climb up above. They're not very cushy. They're pretty Spartan. You get a fire pit to try to. You obviously have seen what happens when fires get out of control in California. So they do try. If you're at a point during the year when open fires are allowed, there are enclosed fire pits. They do give you a food bin, a metal place to store all your food, and you don't have to sit on the floor, on the ground. You've got a picnic table, but that's about it. But the reward is here's your sunset view looking west from up on high. And like I say, it's physically adjacent. You just drive down the road and there's the entrance sign for Sequoia National Park. It's actually number 2 behind Yellowstone, second national park, 1890. Initially, the logging industry wasn't very smart. They were cutting down sequoia trees. And initially, when you see a sequoia, if you happen to be a lumberjack or in the lumbering industry, cha-ching, you see money. The problem is the wood is spectacularly poor for building anything. It's not a hard grained tree, and it splinters to pieces. Well, they didn't know that. So they started clear cutting all the sequoias and dropping them. There used to be 200,000, well, I guess now there are 200,000 acres of old growth trees that are protected. This is the greatest elevation change in any national park. The entryway, if you drive up from Visalia there, up through Three Rivers and come in the entrance from that's the Central Valley. Route 99 is the agricultural breadbasket for the United States. That's down in the Central Valley. The entrance is at 1,700 feet elevation. And Mount Whitney, the tallest point in the lower 48's, almost 14.5. They're both within Sequoia. So the range of altitude is stunning. The most visited section of the park is called Giant Forest, and there are trails that go through it. 5 of the 10 largest trees found anywhere on Earth are in this one grove. It's very, very challenging to capture properly with a still shot. You do need a movie camera so that you can pan up to give it any kind of justice. Just touching the texture of a sequoia tree is unbelievable. That's me with my boys trying to reach around through it. By far the most photographed is the largest living organism anywhere on Earth, single organism, is the General Sherman tree. I don't even know how to compare 52,000 cubic feet to give you a comparison, but as a fun fact, the lower branches of the General Sherman tree, the lowest branches are larger in volume than any tree east of the Mississippi. The branches of General Sherman are bigger than any tree that you've ever seen east of the Mississippi. So to put it in, you just have to go there and get your sore neck from looking up all day. You take a walk through here, and we actually got rained on. We were there in August, and the pine cones were falling. We thought somebody was throwing them at us. They were falling out of the trees, and the pine cones are 2 feet long. So it's not something you want to get whacked in the head with. It's just, they're beautiful. It's just impossible to give you properly. And once in a while they do fall. Hale Tharp lived in the park. He made a cabin out of one of the fallen ones that was all hollowed out. And John Muir used to come and hang out with him. And so that's a point of interest. And you have the famous drive-through that fell across the road. This is Morro Rock. In Sequoia, there are things to see other than just the sequoia trees. Morro Rock, serious project. Somebody carved into the granite a set of steps to get up to the top, where there's safety railings to give you this kind of view of the high country, the Sierra Nevadas. So without all that much effort, you can get quite a remarkable image. There is a cave in Sequoia, Crystal Cave, and this is the bat web, the door that opens, similar to what we saw over in Layman's Caves or in Pinnacles, where the bats can get in and it can keep people out. What's remarkable about Crystal Cave is that it's not limestone, it's made of solid marble. So it flows, it erodes the same way limestone does, but all of the formations are solid marble. I've never been in another marble cave before, so that's unique. This is the High Sierra Trail. See the trail starting low in the middle there and switchbacking up and up and up and up and up to get you up into the top of what are called the Valhalla Cliffs. To hike along the top, you do feel that you can see this series of high lakes that are nestled in up there. If solitude is your thing, this is well earned to get up here. So that's the sunset from Morro Rock. And to, in stunning contrast, right on the other side of the Sierra Nevadas is the lowest point in North America. It goes from Mount Whitney at 14.5 to Death Valley. There are the parks, Yosemite at the north, and then the combo Kings Canyon and Sequoia. And then just on the eastern side is Death Valley, which is actually the largest in square miles. It's the largest national park in the lower 48, just slightly larger than Yellowstone. 3.3 1/3 million acres, more paved roads than any other national park. And there are only a few of them that go through it, but it's just a big park. So it has lots of miles. I'm not going to go through all of these places to go see. I'll just give you a flavor of what a day's drive through the park could give you. Badwater Basin, if you're going to go there, you get up early, because I was there in August, and you don't want to hike in the middle of the day. Badwater Basin heats up in a hurry. This is 282 feet below sea level. The water table is very, very just below the surface, and it's extremely alkaline. It's not something you would fill your water bottle with. Walking, not hiking or not running, walking after 10 a.m. is not recommended. Very dry, very hot. this place, these nodules of calcite, or they're minerals. They're about 2 to 3 feet tall, and some wag called this the devil's golf course. If you play golf, you can imagine what it would be to throw a golf ball down in there. Not a fun place to walk. The artist palette you can drive through this section, this canyon, and there's all kinds of different colorations of minerals that are exposed. So you've got purples and pale pinks and aquamarine and copper and all kinds of stuff. From Badwater Basin, you can physically drive from 280 feet below sea level up to this vantage point at Dante's Overlook. It's 6,000 feet looking down at the Death Valley, at where you just were. You can drive up to there. And you have these yellow mounds. There's all kinds of fun places to drive around to. You don't have to hike an awful lot there. I decided to get up. This was at 8 o'clock in the morning. I figured, I'll beat the heat and start early. They have this digital thermometer outside the visitor center. This is 8 in the morning. It was 115 degrees already. It topped out like 123, 124 degrees that day. And this was early in the morning. So if you're going to go in August, and I talked to one of the rangers, he said it's unbelievable how popular. I said, who the devil comes out here in August other than nuts like me? He said, you would not believe how many Europeans flock to the place because they want to be able to go home and brag that they were in Death Valley at 120 degrees or something, because there's nothing like that in Europe. So they want to experience it at its most extreme. So the rangers end up having to go rescue them all because of dehydration, and they all pass out and need assistance. The old what is it, 40 mule team borax, the old ads, the borax where they dug it out of was in Death Valley. There is a crater. There's a volcanic crater that you can hike out to. It's pretty good size, actually. You got to carry an awful lot of water if you're into biking. I can think of much more areas more conducive to a long bike ride than this, but they're heading out to Titus Canyon, which is kind of cool. But if you have a 4-wheel drive, you can high clearance, you can drive through. There is a somewhat of a semblance of a road through it. Tea Kettle Junction, I don't know where the tradition got started, but somebody started hanging their, after they were camped out and heading back, they left their tea kettles hanging on the signpost, and it caught on. So instead of frat boys hanging bras up in the trees by the ski lifts, they've got tea kettles alongside the campground. This is on the way out to Racetrack Playa. Racetrack Playa is an absolutely unique phenomenon. There are moving rocks, and there's no real scientifically proven explanation as to how these rocks move, but every 3 or 4 years they change position, they run down. The best they can come up with is, it doesn't rain very much in Death Valley, obviously, but when it does, it slicks the surface, and the mud makes it slick. They think that the wind on a mud slickened surface can move the rocks. They move hundreds of yards down the middle of this playa on their own. So it's kind of strange. You got to have a serious wind to be moving, and those aren't small. Those aren't pebbles. They're you could climb up on top of the thing. An odd phenomenon. Very Spartan campsites. There's my tent. You get a spot, a cottonwood gives you some, like an oasis, a little bit of shade anyway. There are wildlife. It's not devoid of creatures. 51 different species of mammals, lots of reptiles. God knows why 300 species of birds want to come through here, but they all live in Death Valley. And where you have coyotes, you have roadrunners. So you can get your pictures of the friendlies. But this is, that's what you get if you hike out into the most absolutely audacious place to go. My favorite is Mesquite Dunes. There are sand dunes out in the middle. Mesquite Dunes is just phenomenal. You can see some footprints there in the middle. Those will last maybe an hour, and then the winds will just remove any trace of any human presence whatsoever. So you can you can hike out here, and this is like the sun shifting in Yosemite changes the shadows and the light on the granite faces. Well, it does the same thing on the sand dunes. The shadows shift, the angle of the sun. You can just sit in one place and watch the light dramatically shift. Into the afternoon, when the sun's rays are lower, it changes the shadows, and you can hang out at night, have the place to yourself, which is very bizarre because the glow off over the mountain there is the neon strip of Las Vegas is maybe 30 miles away from here. So you can go from complete and utter desert solitude to downtown Las Vegas in the matter of an hour or so. Talk about culture shock. So they've national preserves basically serve as protecting land in between national parks. Between Death Valley and Joshua Tree is the Mojave National Preserve. They've added on recently, 2016, the Mojave Trails National Monument was formed, Sand to Snow. These are 3 new national monuments connecting the lands between Death Valley and Joshua Tree. It actually preserves the old Route 66. Not that anybody was building anything there, but this is another desert park, Joshua Tree. Joshua Tree is very unique. There's it's 2 parks in one, actually. It's immediately east of Los Angeles, which actually was a problem, which led to the national park being created, because early in the 1900s, 1920s, the Joshua trees became very fashionable to have as lawn ornaments in your suburban Los Angeles estates. So people were coming out on weekends and digging them up and transporting them back to the point where they were getting all the trees, they were getting scarce. So there was a movement created. They created a national monument so that we could post federal rangers there to stop the depopulation of the Joshua trees. And it got elevated just in 1994 with the Desert Protection Act, upgraded Joshua Tree National Monument to national park status. The park on a map of California, it doesn't look like much, but the park itself is bigger than the state of Rhode Island. So it's good size. When I say it's two parks in one, there is the Route 195 there bisects the park. Everything to the right is actually lower elevation. It's below 3,000 feet in elevation. That's an extension of it's the extreme northwestern section of the Sonoran Desert. It's known as the Colorado Desert. And then if you drive up and to the left, to the northern part, that section of the park, the western half, is above 3,000 feet elevation. And you have very, very different flora. That's the southernmost extension of the Mojave Desert. So you've got the segue from two different desert scenarios. Don't waste your time, in my opinion. The eastern part is not very welcoming. These teddy bear cactus are nasty. I don't know how, it gives you fair warning. The cactus is hazardous, don't touch it. Well, and don't chase your golf balls if it goes into the rough. I swear these things jump. They physically jump toward you if you get in the area of them. They're unbelievable. Why you would want to either hike or ride your bike through this section is beyond me. Spend your time up in the western half. If you're the first ones in an area, you get to name the things. The Mormon, nobody else is living out in the desert here. So when the Mormons were transplanting from Chicago and they hiked the Mormon Trail, they came in their covered wagons to this area. They were the first ones here. And to them, the trees looked like the raised arms of the supplicant Joshua. So that's how they got their name. They're actually not trees at all. They're members of the lily family, and they have succulent fruit. They don't grow anywhere else. If you want to see Joshua trees, you go to this part of the world. There's my tent again. Again, very Spartan. You just use that to lay your head down. You don't come here to sleep. You come here to climb. The rocks, the formations. It's basically like they turned Fred Flintstone loose, and this is his neck of the woods. The texture of that rock, it's called monzonite. You don't want to kneel on it with bare knees, or even if you're clad. It's very, very, not prickly, but it's not smooth. It's not like a smooth shale or granite face. It's got bumps. But there are smooth sandstone formations, and this is an absolute climber's mecca. Bouldering, not climbing like big wall climbing like Yosemite. This is just bouldering. You're rarely more than 20 feet off the ground, but you can spend all day honing your skills, crack climbing. Those are called crash pads down on the bottom there, because he's going to get to a point where he runs out of handholds and he's going to fly off, and that's why it's called a crash pad. You can do roping and rappelling and stuff. There's just rock formations galore throughout the park. Practicing with climbing shoes to friction. There are more climbing routes, numbered, named climbing routes in Joshua Tree than any other national park. There's over 8,000 different routes to climb. you see one section of rocks like here, and there's half a dozen different routes to get to the top. And that's maybe 25, 30 feet tall. But the photo opportunities are just stunning. You can get very creative. The Joshua trees themselves, for a desert, they grow fairly rapidly. That's about 40 feet tall. That's where they would max out, but they're not very deeply rooted. They're fairly shallow. So if you do get a windstorm, it does wreak havoc on the tall ones. You can see those roots aren't very strong, and it's sandy soil that they're in, so they don't have a very good grip on things. The afternoon sun on the formations, it's a lot of fun to climb around. Keys View, you can hike up to. That's the sunset there. That's the same place a little later in the day. And that doesn't end the fun, because so many of the rocks are right next to the climbing area, or the campgrounds, that the the climbers don't stop just because it's nighttime. They just turn the headlights on their trucks and keep climbing. So you can have long days there. Very, very iconic images. Which brings us to Saguaro, the last of our 8 parks for tonight. Speaking of iconic images, that's the true West. The Antiquities Act initially, President Hoover preserved the Rikon Mountains. There's 2 sections of the park. There's an eastern section down there on either side of the city of Tucson. There's an east and a west. The Rikon Mountains is on the eastern shore. That was the original national monument. Secretary Udall convinced President Kennedy to create the Tucson district, which is the western side. And then it upgraded, again, part of the Desert Act in 1994. It got upgraded from national monument to national park. You can literally walk from your hotel in Tucson to this, particularly the Rincon section. I mean, there's a trail right from downtown where you can walk up the trail right into the park, or you can use it as the backdrop for your wedding if you want. If you want a very special backdrop to your wedding pictures. That's the iconic image, the cactus with the big arms. Several of our national parks were created to preserve specifically one unique species. Redwoods National Park, Sequoia National Park, actually Great Basin, even though it's not in the name, that was created to preserve the bristlecone pines that we talked about. Likewise, the Joshua trees. Well, saguaros that's the preservation effort, was to keep them from being eradicated. The Javelina rocks, this is the section of the Rincons. The mountains are what's called a sky island. They're woodlands that rise up. They're at the tops of mountains surrounded by deserts. So you have desert. The Sonoran is this desert. And then you have some high mountains where you have very, very different elevation. So you have oaks and deciduous trees up on the top in the islands. Just to refresh your geography of our great deserts. The 4 deserts, Great Basin we talked about up at the top in Nevada. Then you come down to the Mojave, that segues into the Sonoran, and then over at Big Bend in Texas is the Chihuahua. The Chihuahua Desert's mainly down in Mexico, but it does breach the border up into El Paso and Big Bend area. But those are our 4 main deserts. Most of the Sky Islands are down in Mexico, but there's 27 of them in the US. When the Ice Age gouged out these mountain retreats, they all became isolated. So you have unique species growing totally separated from others. If you're good at mountain biking and don't have to put your legs down to steady yourself, you can bike into the cactus area if you choose to. They do bloom. At the ends of the arms, there are the beautiful white flowers, big, hardy flowers. That's why you go in April when it's a comfortable 70 to 80 degrees versus July and August when you're up in the 100-degree temperatures. When they bloom, even though it's April and May when they bloom, it's still very, very hot during the day. So what happens is they bloom at night, so that they don't get all dry and desiccated and dried up in the heat. They open up, the flowers open up at night, which means their pollinators are not birds, they're bats. The bats that are flying around at night smell them and they come swarming. They're old. Well, they're not bristlecone pine old, but they're 200 years old. The adult sequoias. Their first arms don't appear until they're around 50, 60 years old. They do have a skeleton. It's kind of almost woody, inside covered by the green waxy skin. What that does is it's absolutely phenomenal what they've done. Every saguaro has a network of roots that spreads out around their base. It doesn't rain very often down there. So when it does, you see the vertical lines in the trunk. They're like pleats in like corduroy. They allow the plant to absorb all the water that falls, and they suck it up from a big radius around the plant. They can grab 200 gallons in one rainfall, and to absorb that much, the plant actually expands. So it doesn't have a firm bark on it. It's got a pleated outer coating so that they can engorge themselves. If you go there in the spring, like the third weekend in April, it will change forever your conception of what a desert is all about, because everything is in bloom. You have all these, there's 25 different species of cactus, and they're all over the place, flowering. It's beautiful. 36 different species of reptiles, which you got to have a pretty good eye for because they're all very well camouflaged. You'll walk right by them and not even see them. Jackrabbit, one of 30 species of mammals. Those you do see in the daytime. They'll hang out in the shade of the trees. So if you go now to the other side of Tucson, to the western section, it's a little wilder, more populated with saguaro. Like they just fell out of the sky and you have the invasion from Mars. They're everywhere. They're just dotted on the hillsides. They're all over the place. That's a javelina, peccary, wild pig. You got, like I say, you got to have pretty good eyes to pick out. There are bighorn sheep there. They're hard to spot. You got to be on the lookout for them. Tortoises couldn't care less whether you see them or not. They just blunder around and they'll go eat the fruit of the cactus. Gila monsters, that's why cowboys wear tall leather boots. They're poisonous, and their jaws are very, very strong. 2 foot long lizards, and they're poisonous. So you don't want to mess around with them. But these are good things to know if you're going to go out into the wilderness there. They do have very good displays in the visitors centers that'll alert you to stuff that you should know if you're going to go out hiking where there are rattlesnakes. Like the photo ops are great, but to get up where she is, you had to put your hand on the flat surface to haul yourself up. Well, the warm flat surface is normally where you would find rattlesnakes sunning themselves. So if you're down below and you're reaching up above, you gotta be careful. There are petroglyphs that you can come across, the ancient Anasazis used to live down in this area, and absolutely endless photo opportunities that you just won't see anywhere else. That's a morning, not mist, but that's a morning cloud picture. Sun going down, sunset, lights up the clouds. It's just endless opportunities for iconic images. So that's our presentation for tonight. Thank you for hanging in there. I'm sorry I went a little long here. As just mentioned, March 11th is our next one. The central US aren't quite the iconic parks that we went through tonight. So as she mentioned, as Jessica mentioned, at the end of it, I'll do a little extra for experts on some parks that got deparked. Going to take a brief minute just to tell you about one of the first questions that came up last month was, how do I get you to guide my trip? You know, do you ever bring people out to these places? Well, the answer is yes, actually. My son and I, Brooks and I, have formed an adventure tour group, and our inaugural trip is this coming June. It's a week-long trip. If you got inspired by what you saw in Sequoia, Kings Canyon, and Yosemite, we're going to spend a week in all three of those parks. If you're interested, sfarrars@comcast.net, shoot me an email, and I'll be glad to send you an itinerary and information about it. So if you want a guided hike, love to have you along. On that note, any questions? Jess, are you still with us?
Thank you so
There you
much,
are.
Steve. That was excellent. I'm particularly fascinated by Death Valley. There's so much amazing stuff to see there.
You know what? Some of the parks you can spend an afternoon in and say, okay, I quotation fingers, I did that park. Death Valley is enormous. And there's an awful lot to see. You have to set aside a few days worth to get around in there.
That was
3 million acres.
That was kind of my question. Like, can you do it in bits and pieces, or do you need to drive the whole way through and like camp out? And,
I would
and can you
always recommend,
even camp out there?
You can. There are campgrounds and there are hotels right outside the little desert spas that have hot springs and stuff. All full range, from exotic nice spas to a desert version of a Motel 6. Or you can bring your pup tent and just, I think it's like $15 for a tent site. So you don't have to break the bank to go there. But you got to bring a lot of water.
Yeah, right. Or one of those camper vehicles that person in that image had, where they expand it above
the top. Yep.
Above the top. That was really neat. There was one question. I think you may have talked about this just briefly, but I know there have been pretty big fires the last few years, especially in northern Yosemite. And do you know any specifics of how that has affected the area?
I'll tell you in June. when we go out there. I haven't been there for a while, and it breaks my heart to read stories about the destruction, like up in Glacier National Park in Montana. There's been just these old classic lodges are being burned to the ground with these just out of control fires and stuff. They have them up in Oregon and Washington State, the same thing. I really hate reading about the extent of the damage being done with them. So I'm afraid I haven't kept up with it. I don't, it was in the high country in Yosemite. There haven't been any fires that I know of down through the valley itself.
Yeah, it's a real tragedy. What happens out there it's almost every year now, these devastating forest fires. But thanks for the question. I don't have any other questions. Was there anything else? Were there any other tips that you wanted to share, Steve, before we I should say that we will be back doing this. The next one is the Central US National Parks, as Steve mentioned. That will be on March 11th at 7 p.m. You can register on our calendar.
That's kind of fun. We start way up in the boundary waters up on the Canadian border in Minnesota and come down through the Dakotas, Arkansas, Missouri. We end up down at Big Bend in Texas. So it's down the central part of the US.
I'm interested in that. My sister is in Minnesota right now, and she's suffering through this terrible freeze that's happening in the middle
very
of the
cold.
country right now. So I'm sure she'll be glad for some tips on how to get out of the house once this passes.
Yep.
All right. So if there's no further questions, I think we are complete for tonight. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us. And if you have any questions for next time, just send them my way and I will pass them along.
Okay, thanks for viewing.
Thank you so much.
You.
So
Good
long. all.
night.
Good night.